The Indiana Fever front office just landed itself in massive trouble after one of the most embarrassing revelations you could ever imagine. And yes, Caitlin Clark is right in the middle of the storm, because what fans just discovered is almost too shocking to believe. A professional franchise making millions off Clark's back-to-back sold-out arenas and record-breaking jersey sales doesn't even have a scouting department, not one, not a single person. Is nothing, and the receipts proving it are already out there for the world to see. Think about how crazy that sounds. You've got the most valuable rookie women's basketball has ever seen, a player literally carrying the entire WNBA brand on her shoulders, and the front office surrounding her is so unprepared, they're running this franchise like a rec league team where the coach's friend just calls around asking if somebody knows a player who can hoop. That's the level of chaos we're talking about here. And the internet is absolutely tearing them apart. So here's how this whole disaster actually started. And it's almost comical when you hear the details, because all it took was one slip-up in a basic press conference to expose the Indiana Fever as a front office that doesn't even know how to cover its own tracks. Stephanie White, the Connecticut Sun head coach, was just giving a normal answer about a player named Kira Lambert. Nothing unusual. Just typical coach talk about how Lambert studies the game. How she prepared? Well, how she even knew some of the playbook before stepping on the court. Harmless comments, right? Wrong, because then White casually revealed something she never should have said. Phoenix Mercury forward Brianna Turner, an active WNBA player, was the one who actually discovered Kira Lambert overseas. And that's when everything started falling apart, because fans immediately realized this wasn't just a random detail. It was a full-blown red flag. How in the world is a current player supposed to be moonlighting as a scout for another team? Why is Indiana Fever, a professional franchise swimming in Caitlin Clark money, relying on a player in Europe to do the job that should be handled by an actual scouting department? The moment White said that, alarms went off everywhere, because it confirmed what people had long suspected. The Fever are cutting every corner possible. And instead of building a professional infrastructure to support Clark, they're freeloading off players and connections, like a high school team pretending to be in the big leagues. And it only gets worse from here, because when White was pressed on whether Lambert had been on the Fever's radar before, the answer was a flat-out no, which tells you everything you need to know about how this organization is being run. Instead of saying, yes, our scouts had eyes on her months ago, White admitted Lambert was basically a mystery, until Brianna Turner brought her name up. And that's when the whole charade collapsed. Because think about it, what kind of professional franchise admits they had no clue about a player until another team's player spoon-fed them the information? That's not strategy, that's desperation. And while White tried to spin it by praising Lambert's preparation, her ability to pick up the playbook, her quickness, and her film study habits, none of that changes the fact that the Fever had zero plan, zero scouting, zero system in place to find her. They didn't discover her, they didn't evaluate her, they didn't even have her on their radar. And that right there is the kind of amateur move that proves Indiana is not operating like a professional franchise at all. It's freeloading, plain and simple. And the fact that they're doing it in Caitlin Clark's rookie year, when the spotlight is brighter than ever, makes it look 10 times worse. That's when the plot thickened, and the internet detectives went to work, because fans online immediately started digging through receipts, and what they found left everybody shaking their heads in disbelief. Shout out to Allison on X for pointing it out. First, she exposed the bombshell that the Indiana Fever, the very franchise riding Caitlin Clark's superstar wave to record-breaking ticket sales and national headlines, does not even have a scouting department. Let that sink in for a second. You're running a professional basketball team in 2025 without scouts. None. Zero. Nada. You're basically running the team like a weekend rec league where somebody's cousin calls around recommending players. And fans were furious, rightfully so, because the proof was right there in black and white. While the Indiana Pacers, the Fever's NBA big brothers, have 8 scouts listed on staff who travel, watch film, attend games, and grind to identify the right talent, the Fever have absolutely nobody. Not a single person officially tasked with finding and evaluating players. Instead, they're patching holes by leaning on assistant coaches' old AAU contacts, or worse, asking current players like Brianna Turner to casually recommend someone they bumped into overseas. That's not just lazy, it's embarrassing. And the timing could not be worse, because Caitlin Clark's arrival has turned Indiana from a forgotten franchise into the face of the entire league. And now all that money and attention is exposing the front office for being a total joke. And here's where the whole thing turns from embarrassing to downright insulting. Because while Caitlin Clark is single-handedly transforming the Fever into a money-printing machine selling out arenas, breaking viewership records, and boosting merchandise sales by over 300%, the front office still can't be bothered to invest in the most basic element of a professional franchise: scouts. Think about that contradiction for a second. They're swimming in Clark money, they're raking in millions off the Clark effect. Yet when it comes to actually building a competitive roster around her, they're cutting corners like a used car dealership trying to sell you a lemon. Fans online were quick to drag the franchise, posting screenshots of the Fever's official staff page compared to the Pacers. The Pacers had rows of names: scouts, development coordinators, analytics specialists, while the Fever's list looked like a community outreach team and a couple of coaches, but not a single scout in sight. Imagine bragging about record-breaking jersey sales while simultaneously admitting you don't even have a plan in place to build a championship roster around the player responsible for those sales. That's not just bad management. That's sabotage in plain sight. And every fan who cares about Clark's future has every reason to be furious. And the part that really set fans off was the deeper implication. Because this isn't just sloppy management. This looks like exploitation, plain and simple. Caitlin Clark, a white superstar, is the one being marketed, plastered on every billboard, and turned into the WNBA's golden ticket for money. While at the same time, Black players like Brianna Turner are the ones doing unpaid extra labor to keep the system afloat. Think about that. Turner isn't a scout. She isn't on payroll to recruit talent, yet she's out overseas identifying players for the Fever, while the front office sits back and cashes checks from Clark's popularity. That's not only lazy, it's disrespectful, and the optics are terrible for a league that's been fighting for respect for decades. It sends the message loud and clear. The Fever will squeeze Clark for every dime she brings in, and they'll squeeze players like Turner for unpaid scouting work. But when it comes to actually hiring professionals to build a real roster, suddenly the budget dries up. And fans were quick to call it out, because everybody knows this is not how a professional sports franchise should operate. You don't ask current players to moonlight as scouts. You don't freeload off connections. You invest in infrastructure. You build the machine that makes winning sustainable. Instead, Indiana is running a cut-rate operation that makes the whole WNBA look like a joke at the exact moment the spotlight is brightest. And the part that really set fans off was the deeper implication, because this isn't just sloppy management. This looks like exploitation, plain and simple. Caitlin Clark, a white superstar, is the one being marketed, plastered on every billboard, and turned into the WNBA's golden ticket for money, while at the same time, Black players like Brianna Turner are the ones doing unpaid extra labor to keep the system afloat. Think about that. Turner isn't a scout. She isn't on payroll to recruit talent. Yet she's out overseas, identifying players for the Fever, while the front office sits back and cashes checks from Clark's popularity. That's not only lazy, it's disrespectful. And the optics are terrible for a league that's been fighting for respect for decades. It sends the message loud and clear. The Fever will squeeze Clark for every dime she brings in, and they'll squeeze players like Turner for unpaid scouting work. But when it comes to actually hiring professionals to build a real roster, suddenly the budget dries up. And fans were quick to call it out, because everybody knows this is not how a professional sports franchise should operate. You don't ask current players to moonlight as scouts. You don't freeload off connections. You invest in infrastructure. You build the machine that makes winning sustainable. Instead, Indiana is running a cut-rate operation that makes the whole WNBA look like a joke at the exact moment the spotlight is brightest. But here's the thing, this isn't just an Indiana Fever disaster. This is a WNBA-wide embarrassment, because the more fans looked around, the more they realized other teams are guilty of the exact same shortcuts. The Chicago Sky, the Minnesota Lynx, and several others also don't list formal scouting departments, which begs the question, what's the league's actual plan here? Just wing it? Just hope players keep recommending their friends from overseas and call that talent development? Because that's exactly what it looks like right now, and it's pathetic. The NBA invests millions every year into scouting because they understand one simple truth. Finding the right players is the difference between winning championships and sitting at the bottom of the standings. Meanwhile, the WNBA looks like it's content to run on vibes, patchwork, and hope. And if not for Caitlin Clark dragging millions of eyeballs onto the product every single week, nobody would even know how bad the infrastructure really is. That's what makes this dangerous. Clark is so good, so popular, and so marketable that she's masking the cracks in the league's foundation. But the moment you zoom in, the incompetence is glaring. You can't keep hiding behind her stardom forever. Because the brighter the spotlight shines on Clark, the more obvious the league's failures become. Let me break this down in the simplest math possible, because the numbers make the incompetence even more insulting. Caitlin Clark is projected to generate over $100 million in value for the WNBA this season alone, through ticket sales, television ratings, and merchandise. And the Indiana Fever specifically have sold out games they never would have sold in a million years if she wasn't on the roster. That's the Clark effect, plain and simple. She's the reason the league is even in the national conversation. And yet, instead of using that windfall to build a real team around her, the front office is cutting corners like it's some cheap backyard hustle. No scouting department, no real infrastructure, just marketing campaigns and social media posts pretending the league is growing, while Clark gets battered on the court every single night without the proper supporting cast to protect her. And here's where the sarcasm practically writes itself. The WNBA keeps begging for bigger television contracts, for higher salaries, for more respect, but at the same time, they're admitting they don't even have scouts. That's like demanding Michelin stars while serving instant noodles. You cannot have it both ways. If you want to be treated like a professional league, you have to act like one. And the Fever refusing to hire even one full-time scout proves they're more interested in cashing Clark's checks than giving her a fair shot at a championship. So here's the bottom line. The Indiana Fever front office just got exposed as the most unprofessional operation in the league. Caught red-handed, cutting corners, relying on players to do unpaid scouting, and refusing to invest in the most basic foundation every serious franchise needs. And the timing could not be worse, because Caitlin Clark has given this team more money, more attention, and more momentum than they've ever seen in their history. Yet, instead of rewarding her by building a real championship roster, they're freeloading off her star power and treating her career like a quick cash grab. This isn't just incompetence. This is sabotage, and it makes the entire WNBA look bad, because if the league wants bigger salaries, bigger television deals, and lasting respect, you cannot run franchises without scouts, without infrastructure, without accountability. Clark is the most valuable player women's basketball has ever seen, and if Indiana doesn't wake up, she will not spend her prime years carrying a front office that refuses to even meet the bare minimum standard of professional sports. So congratulations to the Fever. You've turned the biggest blessing in your history into a ticking time bomb. And if Clark decides she's had enough, you'll have nobody to blame but yourselves.